Steve Richards, it's great to have you on, and I do admire your willingness to get up really early to be doing a lot of interviews like this. I'd be lucky if I could get up at 4 in the morning as easily as you can. It's very, very impressive, and I admire your desire to keep doing interviews nonstop even after this. So you seem like a very hardworking man, and I have no doubt that you are. In fact, you have followers. I heard about holographic from several cards that I got from people that I met at conferences and speaking engagements. And when I went on the website, holographic.com, I didn't see anything about them, but I saw stuff about you. So I figured, well, it's kind of a no-brainer. No disrespect to those other people who work at Holographic Kinetics. It only makes sense to get Steve Richards on because, well, I guess you're the apotheosis of holographic kinetics, if that expression makes sense.
We'll just straighten out a little bit. I've got 1,000 students in 40 countries around the world. Nobody works at Holographic Kinetics. There's myself and my partner, and we operate everything from here at our base in Queensland. But we have 1,000 students in 40 countries around the world, which are practitioners trained in this field of different qualities. Some people are new at it, some are old hats at it, some are advanced, because we're constantly advancing all the time and teaching the newer students. Once they get the hang of the basics, we go on and teach them even deeper stuff. Are we there?
I'm sorry, I forgot I was on mute. It happens every single time. So,
Okay.
okay, so with that being said, thank you for introducing yourself and talking about your following. I have no doubt that well, your following is going to continue to grow, especially after I upload our interview here to the net. So to start off this interview, I guess I'll ask, who is Steve Richards? What does he do? What did he experience in his life that got him into holographic kinetics? And then after you give a brief abridged version of your life story, please, why don't you give us the who, what, when, where, why, and how of holographic kinetics? I have a notepad by my side here to jot down any notes about anything that I find interesting that I hear you talking about. I'll be using your holographickinetics.com website as a guide throughout this. And by the way, I also see dreamtime healing appears a few times in capital letters in addition to holographic kinetics on the front homepage of your site. So by all means, tell us what dreamtime healing is as well. So you got the floor. Tell us about yourself and your profession and how it works.
Okay, well, first off, I'm going to explain the name Dreamtime Healing using Holographic Kinetics. I'm an Aboriginal descendant. Aboriginal culture has been around for over 60,000 years. It's one of the oldest cultures in the world. And our culture originally never used to speak. It was all about telepathy, communication with nature. Then we learned to communicate. In nature, everything's alive, and our culture is aware that everything's alive. When it went hunting, it didn't take a grocery full of shopping. It went out the bush. It would talk to the trees, the rocks, the plants. Everything was alive. It acknowledged the knowledge. The dreamtime healing was at night time through the dreamtime. They would sit around and they'd communicate to the spirit of the animals. And the spirit of the animal, just say the kangaroo, next day donates its vehicle, and that spirit gets to move to a higher octave. In other words, it can come back now as an eagle or as a horse or something else, even a human. It can evolve, but it donates its vehicle. What happens if you destroy the vehicle of something when it's not ready to move on? You violate law. And if you violate law, then that animal that you kill can jump you. And we get people out there today barking like a dog and clucking like a chicken called Tourette's, which is part of animal spirits. We bring them up and take them out, no more Tourette's. It's the same as war situations. You go to war and you kill somebody. You know, I worked on soldiers from Somalia, from Afghanistan, from Iraq and from Vietnam. And I've found that after 40 years after Vietnam War, we have spirits of Viet Cong speaking Vietnamese out of the body. We bring them up, have them talking out of the body. We go back to their trauma. We change the trauma, change time, replace it, and release the spirits. No more mental trauma. So let's get back to the dreamtime. The dreamtime is Aboriginal culture of understanding how through the dreamtime you communicate to nature, which is the universe and its laws. Holographic kinetics is the science behind that. I've spent 50 years researching the science of the old ways. Let's go back again. First off, the vehicle. My vehicle, being a body, my great-great-grandmother was an Aboriginal descendant, and she was taken away at the age of 8 by Aboriginal Protection Agency. She was found in horse shackles at the age of 14, sold to a drover, and she died at 15 giving birth to my grandmother, as she was only a small frame being, couldn't handle it. My grandma was brought up in a cattle station, very well educated by the church, but the maids, the servants, the gutlers, the gardeners and the butlers took her under the wing, and they all taught her the old ways. Now, as I was growing up, she would talk about the old ways, and she would teach about the old ways. Now, let's go into spirit. My spirit coming into the vehicle at the moment of conception like everybody else's. By the time I was 4 years old, my mother sat me down and wanted to know, how did I know these things were happening? Because I was telling the future before it occurred. My comment at that age was, doesn't everybody remember the past? Because I remembered the past. No, they don't. I remember the old ways from the past lives, where by the time I was 8 years old, I could make water go around my finger without touching it. By the time I was a teenager, I was doing mind magic. I do hilarious things at parties, but my question was, what in the hell am I doing? What am I doing? You're not taught this. None of this is taught. But this was in the bloodline of the culture of the knowingness. So I spent 50 years trying to understand what it is that we're doing and how does it work. If you go into the Royal Commissions and all the inquiries and we've had here in Australia, every inquiry states one very important thing, and that is the emphasis on the spirit is very important with Aboriginal culture, with everything they do, because the spirit is the life form of every living thing. A tree would be dead without the spirit. The animal would be dead without the spirit. A human would be dead without the spirit. The spirit is the essence that comes in at the moment of conception and gives a life to the being. It's a spark of life to the heart, and through the heart comes the blood, and through the blood comes the bloodline of that particular understanding. So dreamtime healing is Aboriginal culture, understanding. Holographic Kinetics is a science behind it, which we've taken further. Today we understand the quantum level, and we understand the difference between the spirit and the soul. Totally different. If you're doing many methodologies out there today, they're accessing the soul, which is the memories stored in the cells. To understand that, we have a forward, we have a backwards, we have a left, we have a right, we have a high, we have a low. There's an equal opposite to all things in this universe for balance, because at point zero, the point of the observer, you are at point zero between all, and you can move forward in time, backwards in time, ahead of time. There is also an internal world to an external world, as there's an external world to an internal world. The external world to the internal world. The day you're born, your physical vehicle, body, have the holographic memories of all of the ancestors through time, no matter how far back in time you go. And we're going to give you an example here. I'm dealing with an Aboriginal woman who cannot associate with the children because of stolen generation. She comes to me because it's worrying her, because there's no association with the children. We access the cause effect and indicates it's linked to the great-great-great-grandmother. Thank you. I now access through the hologram of time, the spirit of the great-great-great-grandmother through the hologram of time come forward. Next minute I have the spirit of the great-great-great-grandmother crying herself out. In other words, the body on the table, the spirit of that ancestor, through the hologram of time, is reliving the trauma through the body of this person where they've just taken her children. She cannot afford to love any more of her children because she does not know when they can come and take the rest. She shuts down. Now, science today calls that epigenetics because it's now passed down the generational line where they've shut down, they can't associate with the children. We unfold time and space upon the dimension back at its juncture where it was first created. We change the past in the present, which changes and loops time for the future. Once we do that, that girl goes on, that woman goes on, working with the youth and became Australian of the Year. First Aboriginal woman become Australian of the Year by changing that dimension of time. Every cell in you from the day you're born, every memory within you is in your cells, which is part of the soul, part of the cells, part of the DNA. The day you're born, you've been programmed. You've been programmed by the mother. You've been programmed by the father. You've been programmed by the church. You've been programmed by the school. Everything external to internal you take on locks in your cell as part of the program of the soul. Now, to understand that even more, everything in nature is alive. So, your thoughts become a thought form. Your thought form becomes a life form. A life form has a right to survive. So it is going to reproduce itself through the cycles of similarity in time, and you become the host. There we are, stuck in time. Now, I sat for 8 weeks in the courts. I listened to every single youth going through the prison system, through the court system. I don't know, Your Honour, why I keep doing the same thing over and over. They're stuck in time. I don't know, Your Honour, why I keep doing the same thing. Whenever I have alcohol, it's like something takes over. It does. The spirit's talking out of the person on the person there, but nobody's really listening to what it's saying. It's really giving you keys. And when you start to listen, you realise there's 4 parts of a person talking at any one time. You'll have the ego talking, you'll have the soul talking, you'll have the spirit talking, and you can have life forms talking out of the body. It's understanding the dimensions that we are multi-dimensional beings in this multi-dimensional world. Now, our culture's known this for 60,000 years. But our mainstream has never recognised the fact that we're multidimensional, or what's running our world doesn't want our mainstream to understand that we're multidimensional. So, down through time in the physical vehicle, everything external to internal you take on becomes part of your soul. Now let's go to the internal, the equal opposite. The internal to the external is your spirit. Your spirit's here for you. It's to give you everything you want. It has been giving you everything you want, everything you've been hanging on to because you've never told it different. The moment you start to acknowledge the spirit and you as the client, it's got nothing to do with anybody else. You as the client, because this body of yours is your universe. You've created this universe. Every cell has been created by you in this universe. But when you tell your spirit what you want, from internal to external, it can rearrange the atomic structure of you, and it can change your reality. Basically, we have the internal world and the external world being spirit, and the external world, the internal world being the soul. There's also, as I said, with everything in nature, an equal opposite, and everything's alive. Now, if we take as everything being alive once more, and we start to look at our thoughts create thought forms, our thought form becomes life forms. But our thought forms sometimes become assumptions and beliefs. If we have an assumption and we have a belief, then we assume it to be, we believe it to be, and it becomes a reality to us and only to us, to no one else. We have examples out there where I have a woman who's got screaming voices in the head, and she comes to me and she says, this man I'm going with, this thing's attached to him and it's yelling and screaming at her all the time. Well, that's an assumption. The moment I acknowledge that's an assumption to her, she's yelling and screaming, no, it's real, it's happening. I said, listen to me. The effect is you've got yelling and screaming in the head. The assumption is it's coming from this man. How do you know it's coming from this man? You only assume it. But while you assume it and you believe it, you override your own spirit. It can't show you, because in this molecular mortal world, you have the rights to your beliefs and your assumptions. So what takes place? Those beliefs and assumptions override her spirit. Once I get her to put that aside, I get her on the table and we go into access. Her spirit indicates 8 years old. Next minute, she's back there reliving the event of 8 years old with the father and the 2 brothers yelling and screaming at each other, totally petrified at the time. That thought became a thought form, became a life form, got locked in. 40 years later, it's grown into, from a thought to a thought form to a life form. And from a life form, your actions and reactions feed the life form with intelligence, and it learns about you and eventually becomes an internal created entity, and it can take over will. Now we have compulsive disorder, bipolar, schizophrenic, and a whole range of other labels. So because she's hung on to it for 40 years, it's become an internal entity and it's yelling and screaming at her. The moment we go back and find what it is and we found the dimension, we go in after what came into the dimension, and again we unfold time and space on the dimension. Then we go in, change the dimension. Then we go in after the force that's in as a life form, and we read its rights. We capture it in another dimension where it can harm nobody else, and we release it. And the moment we release it, all the voices are gone, back in control again. You know, I've been in high security prisons for mentally insane, people with voices in the head. And we go in to find out where they come from, what's the dimension. We bring up the voices that are in there, which sometimes are entities, sometimes they're spirits, sometimes they're other forces. And if they're spirits, we find out why haven't they moved on, what dimension are they stuck in. They come through with their trauma. We unfold time and space on their trauma. We change the past in the present for the future, and we release those spirits. And the next day, no more voices, and they've been released. I've worked with some of the most violent men in the prison system. The guards are laughing their heads off. Think it's a great joke. No way in the world you can make change this fella. Well, I lock on through the eyes. I get on permission from the guy, get him on the table. 2 years old. His mother and father are alcoholics and drug addicts. He knew nothing but violence all his life because of that. Now, you've got to understand the universe and its laws. One of the most vital laws in the universe is he that enters the game of another is subject to the laws of the game. But who is born under the dimension of another is subject to the laws of the game. He was born under that dimension of the violence and the aggression. That's all he knew. The moment we unfold time and space on dimension and we change that dimension, you couldn't believe how humble with gratitude that man was. He didn't want to be that way, but he was stuck in a dimension of time he had no control over whatsoever till we cleared it. We are multidimensional beings in a multidimensional world. And today, our system is in crisis. Our mental health system is in crisis. Our soldiers are in crisis. Why? Because they're not recognising the multiple dimensions of man. They're only recognising this external physical world of reality and thinking that's where the answer is. Well, that's end product. Look, there's not one of your people out there on air that can hand me a thought because it's invisible. But look at what we've created from a thought into visibility. You sit up on top of a high skyscraper in the city and have a look at, you got planes, you got cars, you got ships, you got buildings, you got TV, you've got, you name it. Everything created was only a thought in the invisible, but we've brought it into visible. First is invisible, then it's visible. We need to understand the invisible before we understand the visible. If we change the invisible, we can change the visible. Our system's trying to do it in reverse. They're dumbing and numbing the visible and hoping that'll change the invisible. Well, it doesn't. All the numbing and dumbing from some of the medication does, it dumbs you down and numbs you and lets bigger forces in because your resistance is down now and you're worse than you were the first time. This is a world and a multidimensional world. Any questions so far?
Yes, before we get into the more stuff about holographic kinetics and dreamtime healing, Aborigines in Australia, very interesting people, and I just want to ask you a couple things about them to see if you're maybe familiar with this. I have heard, and I don't remember if it was Andrew Bartas, the Akashic Records reader, or George Kavasilis, the spirituality metaphysics expert, who, of course, lives in Australia. Those people are my number one and number two sources for information, respectively, on my show, without question. One of them, don't remember who, said that the Australian Aborigines hold the distinction of being the only humans on planet Earth who can say that their DNA, their genetics is pure human. In other words, they do not have the genetics of any other extraterrestrial race out there. It has been said that humans are ETs for all intents and purposes because we are genetic royalty of all the races of ETs out there, and that allegedly is the reason why there's so many ETs trying to visit us, because they're so interested in our DNA and our ET-based genetic royalty. But that is not the case with the Aborigines. They can say, and some might say it's a blessing, some might say it's a curse that they don't have this, that they don't have genetic royalty in them. But in a sense, I guess that's a privilege, because they could say, well, excuse me, this is our planet because we are true humans, and this is a human planet. So can you comment any further on that unique thing about the Aborigines of Australia?
Look, the Aboriginal Australia is, as I said, it's been proved it's the oldest culture in the world. And you've really got to understand our universe and our worlds and our dimensions. Now, to understand that, you've got to go back in time. And what happens was that the Australian Aborigine, the American Indians, the Inuits in Canada, some of the New Guineans and some of the Maoris, and even some of the Fijians races, way back in time, although some of you take the New Zealand and the Fijian, which are later races, but what happened is way back in time, they earned the rights. They earned the rights to come through dimensions in this dimension. And with that came the knowledge of law. The universe unfolds its knowledge upon them as they've come through with that knowledge of law and how to survive within nature and understand nature. The recognition of nature. Everything in nature is acknowledged by them, and they recognise that. They recognise certain mountains, certain hills. They had area just for women's stuff, area just for men's stuff. And in nature, they acknowledge bad spirits, don't go there. They acknowledge areas constantly of what's taken place. They were the Aboriginal, and the Aborigines, don't get me wrong, the Aborigine and Torres Strait Islanders, they blend them together in Australia. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island and everything's linked together. But the Torres Strait Islanders are a totally different race again. They were linked between the New Guineans and Torres Strait, and then they came down into Australia. The Aborigine was a very placid race and understood the universe and its laws. Most of that has been forgotten. Why has it been forgotten? It's been forgotten because of stolen generation. It's been forgotten because father would spend a lifetime passing knowledge from himself to his son, and it would be a lifetime of knowledge of teaching about this universe and how it works. When stolen generation came, and remind you, it wasn't just here in Australia. They did the same thing with the American Indians. They did the same things up in Canada, with Indians in Canada, as well as Australian Aboriginals. And the whole idea of England coming through and doing these things was to take away the knowledge, because it's a matter of the external world controlling the internal world if they can. And the knowledge in the bloodline was the knowledge of the future. In other words, it was the knowledge of the past, but the cycle must come back upon itself. Now, Aboriginal culture they've known for thousands of years that everything will cycle back onto itself, and eventually the old knowledge will come back, which it is. And within that knowledge are the keys to the universe. We cannot survive now, I'll tell you. The way we're going, our world is ready for chaos and destruction because it has forgotten how to abide itself with the laws of the universe. The universe is very intelligent. It is alive, it is intelligent, and it has its own laws for balance. We go back to Australian Aborigine. They earned the rights to come through time with the knowledge, and they align themselves with this knowledge, this universe and its laws. That is in the bloodline. It is the bloodline that is important with all species, their bloodline. You talk of the blue bloods. Yes, the blue bloods have their bloodline, and the blue bloods, of course, what's connected to their bloodline can come through their bloodline and manipulate the vehicle through their bloodline. But it's not just them. We have many different cultures here up on the earth interacting, that have been interacting back in time with different ETs and different species. So our world's not just two different species. Our world consists of many different species here, which this goes back further to our world. Now, let's go back. I've had 17 clients, all from around the world. Nobody knew each other, but they all went back to relive the same trauma that happened over 1 million years ago. And what we had 17. Out of the 17 we've worked on, 11 were aboard UFOs waiting and watching as Earth was about to be destroyed. But the rest were stuck on the planet, no way off, and they were literally screaming hysterically as this planet's coming in and about to hit the Earth. Last memory hits the Earth. Now I call it the billiard ball effect. It hits the Earth moved out of location, it settled into a new location and became a new molecular mortal world, the one we've got today. When that settled down that location, many beings came here because this was a new world in a new dimension to mine this hunk of rock. If you go back to New York and go to the Geological Museum in New York, and you'll see, when I was over there, because I like going to different museums and checking out the past, very first time I saw science are aware that at one time the moon bounced off the Earth. Thank you. There's a verification of what these people witnessed and experienced. But every one of them, I said, look down at your hands and feet and describe your body to me. Oh, my God. Webbed fingers, webbed toes, a reptilian appearance. This was a reptilian world. When the planet got hit and moved out of orbit, this is when all the dinosaurs got wiped off. This is where all the reptilians got wiped off the Earth, and it settled down. Once it settled down, it became a new world. And this is when others started coming here. But in that new world, we have cultures, the Aboriginal culture, American Indians, we had the Inuits in Canada, that actually came through dimensions into this dimension through time. They weren't genetic engineered. There's a difference. This is why they're aware of other dimensions right now. This is why our world, why do you think CERN's doing what it's doing? It's playing around with dimensions. You go back to Philadelphia experiment 1953 it was, and ever since then they've been playing around with time travel and dimensions. Our future is about time travel in the physical world. In the physical world, you're not going to be able to fly a plane from point A to point B. It'll be going in and be teleporting from point A to point B. That will be the future, because that's what they're playing around with. But they also understand there are many other dimensions, not just this Earth's dimension. Now, let's stop and have a look. If I was to go to an observatory and I was looking out into space, I would see galaxy upon galaxies upon galaxies. But wait, if I was to go to an observatory and look through an infrared spectrum of a telescope, I would see galaxies on top of galaxies that I don't see with the naked eye, because the naked eye is linked to one skinny little band that we as molecular mortal beings are linked to. And that skinny band is called visible light. If we go above that, we go ultraviolet, gamma rays, X-rays, and cosmic photons. We go below it. We go infrared, radio waves, TV waves, government trigger plant technology, aura band technology, beta, alpha, theta, delta brainwaves. So the whole range of different frequencies out there, but we're locked into one frequency, visible light. I personally believe there's life on every planet out there in its own dimension. But we look at it in a visible light spectrum. We don't look at it as multidimensional. Our whole world is looking at everything on one skinny little band, visible light, and trying to understand just the visible light spectrum, molecular structure. But before we were even a molecule, what were we? We were an atom. What are your thoughts? Let's have a look how thoughts work. Your thoughts, because here the Earth is mother, Gaia. This is a mother. She gives birth. But it can't have birth without the father, who is the sun. Now, from the sun, it lets out electrons. We capture electrons with our thought around this little ball of light, which is spirit. And that little ball of light we capture as what's known as inverted electromagnetic energy flux. This captures the electrons around this little ball of light. That ball of light becomes an atom and it's programmed. The program of that particular atom is only what it knows. Just say it's anger. Once it programs anger, like attracts like, they come together and they create molecules. Once they create the molecular structure, before the molecular structure, the atomic structure. In other words, it's invisible. There's a mathematical formula for how this universe works. And we understand the mathematical formula, and it spirals down through the Fibonacci maths to the 1 to the square to the cube. It drops into what I call the cube, which is the first form of structure of crystallization into the cells, physical reality. So first is invisible, then is the visible. And once it's locked in the visible, it becomes a thought form to the life form, and it's alive, and you are the host of your own creation. Until you realize what creation you've created and you go back and change that creation. So the Aboriginal culture back in time, yes, its bloodline's very important. But so is American Indians, so is Inuits in Canada, so are many other cultures.
Yes, everybody is special in their own unique way, and I figured I'd make sure I give the Aborigines some credit because, well, you are connected to them and such. So I want to talk a little bit about, well, first of all, something that I always seem to be talking about in my shows in the present day. 'Cause you just brought it up for all intents and purposes when you mentioned soul and spirit. Is there a difference or is there not a difference? Well, some people, some cultures say they're just two different words for the same thing. Others have said there is a distinct difference. George Kavasilis, your fellow Aussie, has given perhaps one of the best descriptions I can give of what the difference is. He says that soul is the eternal essence, and consciousness, which is the awareness of being aware, and spirit both emanate from soul. So what is spirit? Well, according to him, it's basically the manifestations of soul going to different times and places within the acknowledged illusion of time and space in order to have some sort of an experience. So, just for the hell of it, I got to ask you, do you agree or disagree with your fellow Aussie's George Wassler's description of the difference between soul and spirit?
I don't agree with the interpretation.
Hmm.
The spirit is the essence of the being. It's moving through time. It never ceases to be. It's continuous through time and space, and will always will be. The spirit just takes on different vehicles on the journey. Now, just take an example. Just say you're going to go from, Washington to New York, and you take a car as a vehicle, and the vehicle breaks down. You're going to take another vehicle to finish the journey. Your body's a vehicle. It's on a vehicle. As a vehicle, it's on a journey through time, experiencing many different experiences. So, first the spirit comes in the firmament and the gases and the liquid and the rocks and the plankton and the plant life, the insect life, animal life, and the human life. But at each stage, it goes through the octaves of style, the octaves of that particular life form it's in. You take the minerals. The old alchemy from the past, if you know the past and the present, it equals the future. So the past and the present mineral put together through the current and the process will create gold. And that's how they used to create the gold in the past. Everything's moving through octaves. Human. We started at a low level of human, very barbaric. But as we come back through lifetime after lifetime in different vehicles, we learn. We learn. And in other words, if we go out and we kill and mutilate, the universe says, that's fine. Well, you must experience what's like to be killed and mutilated. You created that reality. So when you come back and you create your own reality, you don't like your reality, the universe says, well, that's fine. You want to make changes to it? Because that's affecting the rest of reality. And once you've made change, then you evolve a little bit more. And you start to learn a little bit more of consciousness as you're going. So back to spirit. The spirit is the life form essence that comes in at the moment of conception. And how do I know it's a moment? Well, here's one example. I've got a doctor, and the doctor says to me, well, I'm impatient. All my life I'm impatient. Where's it coming from? Get on the table. We access the cause of the effect, the moment of conception. Thank you. And what's happening? Father's raping mother, and she just wants it over and done with. All his life wants everything over and done with from that moment of time. Because while you're there at that moment of time, and while you're going through that 9-month period, you're actually a hologram of your mother. And every memory is within there of the hologram of your mother. So at the moment of conception, spirit enters, it has that trauma, and therefore all his life wants everything over and done with. Let's go back. The spirit comes in the vehicle at the moment of conception, and the vehicle itself, now they're separate things. The vehicle itself have all the soul memories of all the ancestors in the cells. The soul is the external to the internal experiences locked into your cells. Now, if I put it another way, we go to TV and we watch the police chasing the criminal, and the car's videoing the recording of it. The recording is a bit like the soul. It's recording all the experiences on camera. But wait, the person behind the wheel has the anxiety and the stresses online, which is the spirit, as I liken to it. So in life, the spirit is moving through time, but every time we take a new vehicle, we have a new soul, which has new experience and new memories. If I use hypnosis, I can go back in time and I can access your past soul. Now, just say in this lifetime you speak English and nothing else, but in a past life you're German. You'll speak fluently to me in German, tell me who you lived, how many kids you got, where you live, what the house is, what you do for a living. You're there reliving the experiences of that moment in time, physical experience, because the soul are all the experiences stored within it. I'm going to give you another example. I've got a model in Europe. She comes to me and she says, I get up on the catwalk every day in front of thousands of people. No problems at all. But every morning I wake up with anxiety. I don't know why. On the table. Her spirit indicates the cause the effect is 16. Go there. What's happening? I remember I had a friend come and stay and slept on the lounge room floor and I felt something happen. Thank you. I remember is the soul. The soul remembers the experiences. Thank you. Step aside. Spirit, come forward. Spirit, what took place? He drugged the body and he raped me. He drugged the body and raped me. I couldn't wake the body. Thank you. The spirit had the trauma. The body had no memory of the event. The soul had no memory of the event because it's been drugged and put to sleep. But the spirit now had the trauma. And it was traumatized. You understand the difference?
Yes, I like your description, although people are going to agree to disagree because, like I said, people have different takes on the difference between soul and spirit. And some, like I said, don't say there is no difference, but you seem to describe it pretty well. So I think people could certainly resonate with what you said. So you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. Look, I've been 50 years researching. I've worked on well over 100,000 people. As I said, I've got 1,000 students in 40 countries around the world. I'm not, I'm not putting what I'm saying as my beliefs and assumption. What I'm saying is, through experience of time and working on 100,000 people, and we access the spirit, it tells us how, where, when, and why something came from. When we access the soul, it's living the experiences of the physical vehicle. My research has gone on for 50 odd years about understanding the dimensions and between the two. So what I'm relaying to you is my experience of working with the thousands, hundreds of thousands, 100,000 people at least in that period of time. And through the experiences, they have taught me so much more. In my early days, I understood how animals have spirits, but I wasn't aware of some of the things I've learned through time. This has been a growing process for me of awareness. I've had my reality shattered on many occasions by the universe to show me keys of what's actually happening, how it works, and to get it out there, which we're doing. Let's go an example. I'm going to show you my very first experience when I was dealing with animal spirits, which I had no idea how the involvement of that took place. I have a young boy in a mental institution whose eyes are weeping all the time, and they've got him pumped up on steroids to try and stop the weeping. I go to work on him, and the first thing comes up is cheetah. I said, I beg your pardon, cheetah. I said, what do you mean cheetah? Like a tiger, a big cat. Am I speaking the spirit of a cheetah? Yes, that's right. What's happening? I'm walking through long grass. What's happening? I've got a grass seed in my eye. Thank you. And what's happening? It sprouted. I went blind. I died. I thought, what in the hell has this got to do with the boy? Spirit of the boy, come forward. I want you to go to the age when your eyes start playing up. 13. Thank you. And what's happening? I'm smoking dope. Thank you. And what's happening? The smoke from the dope's irritating my eyes. Thank you. At the time, I wasn't aware that the spirit of the cheetah had evolved through time and is now the boy, but it still has a trauma in the eyes that's never been cleared. I'll give you another example to understand it a little bit more. I'm going to give you an example here of a woman. This woman, she comes to me and she's had 3 spinal operations. She's riddled with pain 40 years later on the table. We go look at the cause effect. Her spirit indicates 18. Thank you. Next minute she's screaming hysterically. Her spirit takes back to 18. I forgot, I totally forgot. She totally wiped it from her mind. Thank you. What happened? I had head-on collision in a car when I was 18. Thank you. And what happened? The other woman died. Thank you. Well, the first thing I look for is what's known as reciprocal exchange of energy. If you're responsible for the death of another, that spirit has a right to continue on in your vehicle, sharing your vehicle with you. I checked and sure enough, the spirit of the vehicle, the spirit of the other woman is in there, and I brought it up. Boy, was she angry, this woman. She was swearing and cursing because this woman was careless and killed her. So I say to the spirit, listen to me. Everything's happening now has happened before, deja vu. Everything's happening now is going to happen again. You don't want the same thing to happen again, do you? No, let's change time. We unfold time and space and dimension, and we clear and release the spirit. Instantly, all the spinal issues disappeared. Now, she'd had 3 spinal operations for what didn't even belong to her. I've had this on so many occasions with people when they have spirits in them that don't even belong to them, but the spirit has a right to be there because they're responsible for the death of that person in the past.
Dog getting a little hyper.
Yeah, so on the front door. I think the dog just no, just hang on. Just give me a minute.
No problem.
Okay, take me out.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's cool. So I want to talk about the difference between another 2 different words
Sure.
well, interestingly, George Kavaslis also seems to be talking about this a lot, the difference between law and lore, and you do have a little sub-topic thing on your list here on the homepage of your website. So what's the difference? Well, I mean, when you're talking about universal law, that's completely different from the down-to-earth law that we think of, and well, let me make it clear that when you're talking about law from a down-to-earth level, there has to be a contract for there to be a law. If there is no contract, it's just what someone considers to be public policy. But that's different from like natural law or universal law, which nobody can escape from. Now, lore, on the other hand, well, what is lore? When I see that word, I think, okay, mythology, folk tales, and legends. And the difference, well, mythology. What is mythology? Well, Jordan Maxwell, the great occult researcher, once said that the difference between mythology and religion is, well, they're both the same thing, with the one difference being you would not call something a religion unless you follow it and you believe it to be true. And you would not call something a mythology unless someone else believes it and you do not acknowledge or believe it to be true. Now, folk tales are, well, actually, I should say legends next. Legends are the same thing as mythology and religion, as Jordan would say, but they're a little more down to earth than religion and mythology. And folk tales, well, unlike myths and legends, which are thought to be mostly true by the people that talk about them, well, the people that believe them, in that case, mythology would be a religion if you believe it to be true, but folktales, you don't, they're not acknowledged to be true by the people that tell them. They're thought to be fictional in their most part. And that, I think, mythology, legends, and folktales would probably be what would fall under the category of lore. And, well, right there you have the difference between lore and law. Now, is my description accurate, or do you think maybe I'm missing a little something in there?
I think you're missing plenty.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let's go back. You talk about mythology. Okay, let's go back and do some research. Let's do some research on facts. Between 500 and 700 BC, our world was run by Draco, a 7th century Athenian, when death was dealt out of the smallest of penalties. A new god arrived here, in other words, new ET arrived here, and that new ET was Zeus and his descendants, Hades, Nephilim, Hermes, Apollo, Dias, Demetrius. And they had a war with the Draconians cast in the lower world. Remember, the brain waves are in the lower level. Beta, alpha, theta, delta in the lower worlds. They cast in the lower world, well, they can manipulate the brainwaves of humans. But let's go back onto Zeus. So Zeus's descendants decided, let's not create wars anymore. Let's create a new game. Let's create the best of the hybrid species up on the earth. So in 776 BC, Zeus and his descendants created the Olympic Games. They were known as the Olympians. The first Olympic Games, and you talk about mythology. Well, Olympic Games knows a reality. Talk about mythology. Well, the first Olympic Games were run by Hercules, who was Zeus's son. Now, hang on. Does the Olympic Games work? Yes. Is it reality? Yes. Does Hercules run the first Olympic Games? Yes. Is it mythology? No. Did Hercules' father was Zeus? Yes. Is it mythology? No. So, let's get your mythology and let's get reality and get these straight. What was mythology was, well, because we can't understand, we don't want the public and we don't want the people to know, we'll call it a myth. But this mythology of Zeus is a reality when his son was Hercules, and Hercules won our first Olympic Games. And every 4 years we celebrate the Olympic Games to see which is the best of the hybrid species, run and controlled by another dimension. That's one. Now let's go back to law. The universe, the word law, go to the dictionary. It says universal knowledge. The universe is an intelligent, knowledgeable beings, and it has its own laws. Now, the first law is the law of intent. The second is the law of duality. The third law is the law of agreement, which is a triangle. The fourth is the first form of matter, which comes from invisible into visible. Then we go to the five. You draw your square, which is the visible world, put the triangle law of agreement on it. You got your 5 sides, you got the pentagram. It's interesting, a pentagon's a pentagram. And you've just called something in from another dimension. When that enters you, it enters into the 6, which is entrapment within you. It then changes you with the 7. It then sets itself up to repeat over and over throughout your life, which is the 8, stuck in time. When we release it through the 9, we complete the dimension, ready to clear another dimension of reality. The 360 degrees, the cycle of completion. So, law itself has its own laws. It has first universal maths and geometry as part of its law. It also has its own laws of balance. Now, first to understand, he who enters the game of another will be subject to the laws of the game. He who is born under the dimension of another is some by the laws of the game. But wait, nothing can enter your space because the law has set up its own protection for balance in the universe. Without these laws of law, L-O-R-E, we would have chaos. So part of the laws, nothing can enter your space unless you let it in. So what do? They set up all these games. They set up all these games to get you open doors and let them in. They set up the drugs, they set up the alcohol, they set up initiations and rituals. Right through time, these open wormholes to other dimensions, and they let other beings in. But wait, those that run our governments today at high level, let's have a good look here. You don't get into high level of government unless you run to a secret society. And if you run to a secret society and you belong to a secret society, then you've entered the games of others. And your choices you're making aren't your choices. You're being manipulated by other dimensions that run our world today. But those dimensions have no right to enter in the space of a being. If anything enters your space, it's governed by the laws of your dimension. And you can deal with anything that comes into your space. But if you invite it in, you give it permission to access your dimension. You know, we're clearing people every single week. As I said, there's over 1,000 students in 40 countries. And every week we are clearing interdimensional stuff out of people, and we send them back to the cause effect of the agreement of entrapment of these forces and where they've come in. We change the back of that juncture. We change the dimension. We replace time, put them outside, we take out these forces. And all of a sudden, we have sanity again, not the voice in the head, not all the confusion. Our world is a multidimensional world. Now, you've got to ask yourself, what is mythology? Because to me, the myths are just that. They're myths, but what is reality? And reality is what we can't explain. We can't explain the gods coming from the heavens. We can't explain the wars in the heavens. We can't explain these things, so we put them down all as myths. Law is the universe, and its knowledge has laws. And if you violate those laws, there are consequences. I look at it like this. You look at the young people going out today that are breaking into houses and breaking into cars and stealing. And the universe looks down and says, okay, you want to take from others? Then I'll keep taking from you and you'll have nothing. But when you put something into me, I'll put something into you. For that is the universe and its laws. It's there for you. What you put into it, it'll give back. What you take from it, it'll take from you. It's all about balance.
Oh yeah, no question. That sometimes I hear people like who have like ruined their whole lives and everything, and they've lost everything, and they're like, all my options in life are gone. I basically have two choices to make a living: either sell drugs or steal from people. And I tell them, well, if that really is the case, make sure you stick to the former and not the latter. Because if you steal from people, you're going to get robbed. If you sell drugs, well, you may have a little bit of bad karma because you're not necessarily doing good for people, giving them substances that have addiction potential and can cause problems, but you're not going to have as many problems as you would if you steal from people. So not that I'd advocate screwing around with your life to the point where you have no other options, but that's my point. What my point is, don't steal, because find other ways to get through your life, or yeah, karma will come back to bite you. So with that being said, want to move on to something else here. You mentioned thoughts and earlier, and how they act and how they work and what they do. I have heard from many people in the metaphysics field that emotions are much more important than thoughts, and they've even said thoughts, that's masculine, emotions is feminine, and thoughts are electrical, which is masculine, and emotions are magnetic, which is feminine. And the thing about thoughts, well, they say thoughts, they manifest into reality, but in truth, you got to be emotional about something for it to really be able to manifest. Well, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg there. When you want to differentiate between thoughts and emotions to figure out how emotions can create reality better than thoughts can, could you perhaps enlighten me on this? Because I know I'm missing a lot here in my brief understanding.
Sure. Look, your actual thoughts create the emotions. What we've got here, and the way I teach the students is I show them a graph structure that we're actually using here. And we've got the cause, we've got the action, got the reaction, got the effect. So the cause is what's happening, which is the thought form. The action, so wherever the cause is happening. Just say you're at home as a 3-year-old and mum and dad are arguing and carrying on. There's a cause and there's that action. What's your reaction? Because your reaction creates the thought and the emotions. And the emotions are different. I mean, you can have two people, you can have two children in the one house. seeing the same event. But each child will take it different. One can get very emotional over it and lock that in. And emotion will lock into the thought process. It's still a thought, but the emotion is the density level of how deep it locks in within you and how much energy you're going to give it. The more energy you give it, remember, the thought locked in. Once it's locked in, it becomes a thought, and it becomes a thought form, and it becomes a life form. Everything in life has a right to survive. So that life form now, with your emotions attached to it, that's all it knows. It's going to reproduce itself, and you are the host. Now it's going to set you up. Just say it's sadness. Okay. So here's the thought process of an event that's happened in sadness. Now, once it's locked into your cells and it's locked in onto the feminine side of the body, you know, the left-hand side, but the feminine is the internal world. It is spirit. It's the artistic. It's the creative. It is intuition. The right-hand side, looking down at your own body, on the right-hand side is the masculine, the analytical, the external world. So it locks in on the internal world, and within the internal world, it creates a thought to a thought form. It becomes a dimension. Now, your lifetime dimension is from the day you're born to the day you die. That's your lifetime dimension. Every single person has a separate dimension as a lifetime dimension. But the thought from the day it was created, it locks in and it's growing. Now, do you let go of it in 1 hour? Do you let go of it in a week? Do you let go of it in a month? Do you hang on to it for 10 years? Do you hang on to it for 100 years? Do you hang on to it for 1,000 years? You can hang on for that event through time in its own dimension, and lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. You can come back, sit up under the same dimension, governed by that dimension. So the same scenario can take place through time over and over again. So let's just take this lifetime. Once it locks into your cells, the thought becomes a thought form, becomes a life form. The sadness is going to reproduce itself. It's going to set you up for situations throughout your life to justify its existence and to be sad. And you don't know why you're sad all the time. You don't know why you feel this way all the time. But the moment we go back and find where this came from, we change the dimension and clear it. We're getting you to replace it back in time. And the moment we change the past, we're actually doing through internal hyperspace, we're moving through time. Just think for a moment. If I send you back to 3 months old and you're living a trauma 3 months old and we're changing it, and we look into the future and we see you as a 55-year-old, you're changing it there and you're changing the future. You come back into the now and you've actually just changed the future from this moment on. You've changed time. We're moving out of dimensions of time. This is what this is about. So your thought is alive and your emotions are the density and the energy you're giving that particular emotion, which is going to create more of the same, which is going to, again, how long do you want to hang on to it for? Do you want to hang on to it for just a few days and you let go of it? Gone, finished, thank you. Or the density level of that means you can hang on to that for lifetime after lifetime. And that'll come back as an emotion every time. You know, I go to Children's Hospital and the doctors say to me, we have no idea what's wrong with half the kids in here. Well, my comment is that's because spirit brings up trauma of the past and sets it up in the first 7 years. And it's now activated. Any death, trauma of the past. You know, we have people with psoriasis. We go back in a past life and they're burnt to the stake of the Inquisition. Last memory is the skin dropping off their body. This lifetime they're born with psoriasis because the trauma is still online. That trauma comes through in the first 7 years and set itself up with the children. Then the cycles of similarity keep going through time. Everything is set up, I believe, in the first 14 years. Well, I must say everything. I'll say 95% of issues are set up in the first 14 years. The rest are just cycles of similarity.
Thank you for explaining that. And another two subjects that I'd like to move on here. You can take as long as you need to discuss these things, but I'd like to try to get as many different subjects into the show as possible in the 2 hours we have. So I may go on the fly, but by all means, take as long as you need to explain these things. Another thing here I'm seeing here on the tabs, violence and anger. Now this is interesting because many would assert you want to try to get rid of anger because it's not healthy to be angry. You got to be love-based. Anger, as Yoda would say, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate will lead to the dark side. And some people like being mad, and I'm going to be honest with you. I kind of like being mad. I mean, being mad allows me to really want to put a stop to the evil agenda of the powers that be. And I feel that if I wasn't a little bit angry and a little bit, you know what I mean? I can't imagine how I could possibly do what I can to fulfill my mission on this earth of suppressing fear and spreading love. It may seem counterintuitive, but I mean, it's not the anger like angry at someone because I don't agree with them or what they're doing. It's the kind of anger that you feel like if you got a big iceberg on you or something large on you, like a tree's falling on you, and you gotta get up all that anger and all to get that tree or that iceberg off of you. Some people like that feeling. I like that feeling, and I personally think that having that feeling enables me to, counter to as it may seem, suppress fear and spread love. And violence, they say, never solves anything. Well, I don't know. I've heard some people in the ET contactee field, some people that have ties to the star system of Sirius, say that there are beings from Sirius that are love-based, but they're warriors. And the reason they're warriors is because, well, simply put, when you gotta fight evil Draco-Reptilians who are also of a warrior base, you gotta fight fire with fire. There's no other way to put a stop to them, unfortunately. I mean, some say just radiate love from your heart chakra because love is a weapon when it comes to fighting these evil forces. But others say, no, it's not that easy. You run into an evil reptilian alien, you got no choice. You're going to be torn to shreds in a heartbeat, no matter how heartwarming or physical you want to be. You got to learn how to, well, as these Syrian warriors have allegedly done, used violence to put a stop to the fear-based evil reptilians and all the other forces out there that are a hindrance to our awakening. So when it comes to violence and anger, when are they good, and how can they possibly be good when, like I said, it seems counterintuitive that they'd be good when they seem to go against love?
Well, personally, I really don't like the word love because it's a man-made word. But let's continue on where we were. And that is that, first off, if you're going to talk the draconians in this sense, then I'm hearing your words and you're talking in three dimensions. You're talking in, out there we have extraterrestrials, extra-dimensionals, and interdimensionals. Now, most draconians manipulating humans today come in through the rituals that have been taking place through time. You might have made rituals 3,000 or say 30,000 years ago. You're into rituals and sacrifices manipulated by these beings. That means that agreement you went into 30,000 years ago is still valid. And that means every lifetime you're going to be seduced into that dimension because you're under the guise of that dimension and you're going to get into ritual stuff. So lifetime after lifetime, you're still in their game. Now, most draconian stuff is metaphysical, in other words. I've had people sitting up on the table. We've accessed these things. I've had people sitting up on the table, the eyes gone to slits, and I've had these reptilian things hissing, spitting out of the body at us. It's understanding the metaphysics of it. This is our world and our dimension. It's understanding how to control this dimension. And once we control this dimension, we can deal with anything that comes in this dimension that does not have a right to this dimension. They are coming from other dimensions. Remember, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, and interdimensional. Well, let's go to that. Extra-dimensionals, you have things that are coming out there from other planets. Excuse me. Things are coming from other planets. That's extraterrestrials. You have extra-dimensionals. Extra-dimensional things in the ionosphere that are cloaking themselves and come through dimensions. The moment they come through our dimension, then the military can deal with them because they're in the physical dimension. But that's why they cloak themselves. They cloak themselves to stay out of this dimension, so their atomic structure is not molecular structure, and therefore they're observing from outside of the dimension. At a very high level, we have dealt with them at that time in that dimension. But mostly what we're focusing today is we're focusing with humans and interdimensionals. We're focused on the variable range of beings. In other words, you have spirits, you have entities, you have the draconians, the hierarchy, a whole range of other beings out there that are manipulating humans. And they're coming through from drugs, through rituals, and a whole range of other things. Now, in doing that, because this is our world, we have the rights to this world. And we have the rights to do this. We have the rights to clear anything coming to our dimension. You talk about the anger. Well, if you've got anger online, that's your free will choice. It's either your free will choice or you're stuck in a dimension of cycles of similarity that's happened from way back in time, which you've never let go of. You can justify it all you want. And if you like the anger, that's fine. You're stuck in it. But once you release the anger and the anger is not there, you can go back to point zero as the observer to the game. And you're no longer in action or reaction, but the observer. And if you are the observer to the game and you understand how to deal with this game, then you'll understand how to deal with the dimensions and the beings and things that are coming into our dimension from other dimensions. This is our world, this is our dimension, and we have the rights to this dimension. You've got to understand the key. And once you come from point zero and you understand this game, you are more powerful in what you can do metaphysically than physically. If you want to go and you talk about these other beings from other planetary systems and fight on a physical level, yeah, that's fine. I mean, these things physically, they're up to 15 foot tall. They're big, they're powerful, and yes, they could rip you to pieces in the physical world of reality. But right now, they're not in the physical world of reality. They're in the metaphysical world of reality, and they're affecting human beings. And most of the time, the humans that are in their game have somewhere in time entered the game through rituals. This is where people have to go back in time, no matter how far back. We have to take them back and we have to change the cause-effect agreement they made way back in time with these beings, change time, loop time, put them outside time so it never exists in the future. A little bit easier to explain that a little bit more. I'm going to explain an unusual Tourette's case I had. And I get a phone call on Christmas morning. Christmas morning at 3 o'clock, young Aboriginal lad rings me up. My sister, something's taken over and she's gone berserk. It's screaming and yelling out and throwing her around the room. Track her down. At 5 o'clock, he tracks her down at the bus station. I said, put her on the phone. And I could hear her yelling, swearing and screaming out of her. I said, best get your butt down here as fast as you can. She comes down here and I go to work on her. And Christmas morning had triggered off family stuff from 2 years ago that had not been dealt with. But that in turn triggered a dimension of family stuff from 2 lifetimes ago that had never been dealt with. You're there now, what's happened? It's an arranged marriage. I hate him, I wanted to marry someone else, but I was forced to marry him. Continue, what's happening? I'm having it down by the creek. I'm having it off with all the farmhands. I'm loving it, rubbing into him. Thank you, and what's happening? He's bashing the daylights out of me. Thank you, and what's happening? I pulled out a knife and I run him through. Thank you. Did you kill him? Yes. Thank you. Now that means I've got reciprocal exchange of energy. That means the spirit of him's in there. I call him up. Oh boy, was he aggressive. He's screaming and yelling. He wants to punish her. He wants to punish her because she wouldn't love him. So I go back and change time. I change the dimension. And this is spirit we're dealing with in here. And this is the very first time when I go to release him, I'm not leaving. I want her to suffer. Whoa, hang on. Now, I've got no rights in taking this fella out to the right to be there. So where do I go from here? So I just say to my spirit, where do I go from here? It says, enfold time and space on her dimension of reality so he does not exist in her future cycles of time. So I got her to meet the man she wanted. We close off the wormhole of time. He didn't even exist in that dimension. Close off the wormhole. Now I bring him through again. You have 2 choices. You can stay earthbound or you can move on. Okay. Finally, he decides to go. Now, the key here was, once the wormhole of that dimension is closed off, he can't get back in that in the future. And this is the same as these beings. When you close off the wormhole in the past, they cannot get back into the future. Therefore, you're not in a game in the future. And every time we do this, we're bettering the future cycle to Earth. Once we cleared him out, instantly all the Tourette's stopped, all the yelling and screaming, total control. So this is just a little bit of what's going on out there. It is a multidimensional world, and you're talking of many different levels. You're talking of a physical level of physical beings. Yes, they are. They're monstrous in the physical world, but right now they're not in our physical world. They're in the metaphysical world. They may have come through the physical world into some of the bases and the military bases in there where remember, they formed the Trilateral Commission, which was the Trilateral Treaty. They formed the agreement with these beings. And when they did that, they got taken over. When these politicians go into the secret society, they get taken over. Who do you think's running our world? And in these secret societies, these things can shapeshift out of humans at these rituals. And these guys, I'll tell you now, they're going to be scared stiff when they see something shapeshifting in the room because they are in its game. I've had things shapeshifting on the table on many occasions. And believe me, it's knowing how to control the game because they're from another dimension. And while they're in another dimension, they're governed by the laws of our dimension. We just have to capture them in our game and understand how to control it.
Thank you. And when it comes to the issue of dimensions, this is a little bit of a debatable subject in regards to what classifies what dimension you are in. Now, to complicate this issue even further, now I don't want to talk too much about the difference between these things. It does make for a good conversation. We've got more important things to worry about, like the whole difference between dimension and density. Some people say they're just two different words for the same thing. Others say the difference between dimension and density is blah, blah, blah. But to complicate the issue even further, some say, no, that's not the difference. The difference is not blah, blah, blah. The difference is yada, yada, yada. Now, my point in saying this is that maybe there is no sense in debating the difference between dimension and density, because people are always going to either acknowledge it's the same thing, or they're not going to be able to agree on what the difference is if they claim that there's a difference. However, when it talks about let's just, for all intents and purposes for this interview, just use the words interchangeably and to try to determine what a dimension is, or what determines what dimension an entity is in. Now, one school of thought is that it has to do with the degree to which you are service to self versus service to others. And George Kavaslis, I mentioned him again, quite fitting because you're from Australia, he's from Australia. But anyhow, he has asserted rather boldly that those reptilians, the malevolent ones anyway, and also malevolent greys, they don't come from the lower fourth dimension, as David Icke and all the other researchers out there, and pretty much everybody else besides George, would assert. They say they're from the lower fourth. He says they're from the second dimension. I actually had the opportunity to confront George about this when I called into a show that he was a guest on back in the day, and I asked him, so why the contradiction between you and everybody else? And his answer was, there are reptilian entities in the second, third, and fourth dimensions. The malevolent ones who are doing bad things to humanity come from the second dimension, but they impose their will under the guise of lower fourth dimensional entities. And when I interviewed Alfred Weber and said, well, if George Kavaslis is right, how can that be explained? Alfred Weber said, well, I think the best way to explain it is the dimension you are in has to do with the degree to which you are service to self versus service to others. They are naturally service to self, which puts them as a second dimensional entity, but when they act like service to others entities to make us think that they're good guys who care for us, they're imposing their will under the guise of a lower fourth dimensional entity. Now, that the description of dimension has nothing to do with the extent to which your body is crystalline or light-based, as some others would assert is what classifies the dimension or density you're in. But do you think maybe George Kavaslis knows what he's talking about when he says they're actually second dimensions entities that impose their will under the guise of lower fourth dimensional entities?
Look, everybody out there have their own beliefs and assumptions, and a lot of time they are just that, beliefs and assumption. You believe it, you assume it, you believe it, it becomes your reality. And the way I look at it is that you look at the light's frequency spectrum. As I said, we're in the visible light spectrum, but above that you get the ultraviolet, the X-rays, the gamma rays, the cosmic photons. Below it, infrared, you get the microwaves, the radio waves, the audio, AC, but you've also got the beta, alpha, theta, delta. Now we know right now in our you take right now in your office, you're talking on a mic. There are invisible waves going out through the atmosphere. Do you see them? No, you don't. We have the Wi-Fi waves. Do you see them? No, you don't. We have the TV waves. Do you see them? No, you don't. Now, each one of those waves is really in its own dimension. And the way we look at dimensions is the fact that from the beginning, I look at dimension two ways. From the beginning to its end, a lifetime dimension. The day you're born to the day you die, that is a cycle, and that is the dimension of a lifetime. The day you take that thought and you hang on to it, that is a dimension of that thought process within its own dimension of time, and it can be for 1 second or it can be for thousands of years. That's up to the individual to how long they choose to hang on to it, because it's always about free will choice. Now, when we deal with other beings, if we go above the visible light spectrum, we have many separate dimensions above that that we don't see. We only see naked eye, visible light, that's all. If we go below that, there are many separate dimensions. So, if we take our world, how many other beings are living in this world? In this world alone, we can have other worlds living on top of this world that we don't even see, because we're locked in this dimension. And the dimension we're locked in is our physical, molecular, mortal world with a dimension of its own from its beginning to its end. Now, above that can be another frequency of other worlds, and above that another frequency of other worlds. There can be multiple dimensions of worlds out there. So I don't look at these as saying density 1, density 2, or we're going to go one may be locked into a dimension of the fourth dimension, the third dimension. Look, I look at it, dimension's been endless. Every thought you've ever had is a separate dimension of time. How many thoughts you had? Every molecule in your body, every atom in your body, every single cell in your body has memories stored in it. Because part of you is the hologram which you are. Those fractals in you are part of the hologram. Those fractals tell the other fractals, tell the other fractals, tell the other fractals as part of it. So there's millions of fractals in you, which are little universes in you, but they make you. If I take one cell of blood of you and I put it on a hemoview machine and I look at that cell of blood, I see a whole galaxy of life forms inside that one cell of blood, which is a whole dimension, again, of another level, of its dimension. In other words, that cell of blood is a whole universe inside one little cell of blood of you in front of. But hang on, there's millions of cells of you, millions of universes of you. If we go the next step up to the sun, it's only one ball of light of another dimension. And its dimension, it's millions of other dimensions of little balls of light called suns. So, I'm a little bit confused when these people start to say the fourth dimension, the third dimension. A lot of the time I think it's just words. And some words I find are very hollow with people. They don't really understand the words they're saying, and they don't understand the meaning behind the words they're saying. They are just words. It's like when people talk about spirit and the soul. Again, they're just words with people. It's surprising how many times I've got to go through my students, keep going through. Hey, let's get back again. Let's get back. When you're talking to the body and you're talking to the spirit, it's not just a word. You've got to understand what you're talking to and how you're addressing it, because it's an intelligent being which is running this vehicle and it needs guidance from the person whose vehicle it is. It's the same as when you're dealing with the soul. The memories experience are locked in the cells, and we can access those memory experiences. And this is where science called epigenetics. Finally epigenetics, they realise that the spirit of the ancestors down through time can affect the generations down there. Well, it's actually the soul of the memories in the cells that are passing down through time of all the issues. Well, we can access them. Epigenetics, the science can't access it. We can bring the ancestors through and have them talking out of the body, no matter how many generations back they are. So when we come to dimensions, to me, anything created as a thought is growing in its own dimension of time. The day you're born is a dimension of a lifetime. So how many dimensions are there? Endless dimensions, endless. So we're not going to govern them into dimensions. Our world is in its own dimension, which is a visible light spectrum of that dimension. And above it are many other dimensions, and below it many other dimensions.
Thank
There's
you.
my explanation.
Fair enough. Lots of different explanations have been given. George Kavassilis even once said, what I see as the fifth dimension is what someone else might see as the edge of the visible universe. And when I did a private session with him, I did ask him, why do you give that description? And he explained it. People are welcome to check out that private session. It's one of the first things I ever uploaded to my YouTube channel. But anyhow, I want to get on with a couple more of these things here down the list. We're going down the list pretty well. I'm sure we'll cover everything and then some. Skeptics and intent. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. First of all, intent. David Icke had said many times in his presentations that if you want to be someone who wakes up humanity and fights to suppress fear and spread love, then you have to understand you're going to run into problems. And why is that? Well, because your intent is to do something that doesn't really resonate well in this prison planet we call Earth. I mean, I hate to say that Earth is a prison planet. I mean, it still is. We're getting more love. We're getting less fear. The matrix is breaking down more and more every day. But for all intents and purposes, it still would be classified as a prison planet. And when you're living on a prison planet that's filled with lies, scams, fraud, deceit, illusion, and delusion, and many people on that prison planet are so paradigmatic, so fearful, and so stupid that they will not believe something shocking or disturbing, even if the evidence is presented that shows that they have no choice but to believe it. Case in point, 9/11 was an inside job, and lots of other conspiracy theories that are actually conspiracy facts. You try to expose that because your intent is to do something which isn't compatible in this matrix, you're going to run into problems. That's the first thing about intent. The second thing, and I think this is very important, I point this out now because I'm sure a lot of people that are going to be listening to this talk that we're doing are going to be saying, yo, Andrew, Steve, well, what do you think you're doing talking about reptilians so much in this interview? Don't you realize you're giving them your power when you talk about them? Well, no, we're not. Because, well, I'm sure you have this intention, and I definitely have this intention. One reason I talk about them is because I have the intention of stopping their evil agenda, and as long as my intention is to stop their evil agenda, then I'm definitely not going to give them any power. And people like David Icke, Alex Jones of InfoWars, and even Jordan Maxwell to some extent, they could all say we're not giving them our power, even though we talk a lot of doom and gloom and fearmonger and fear porn and that stuff, because our intent is to stop evil and in the end spread love, even though it may not seem like that sometimes the way we present it. So that is what I have to say about intent. And well, I don't really know what to say. I don't understand why you put skeptics and intent in the same thing there. I don't think I've ever seen the word skeptics and intent together. I'm interested to see why you would put that there and what that article is all about. But in regards to intent, I mean, do you basically agree, or do you disagree for that matter, with my explanation of what intent is, how it works, and why you're not giving the bad guys your power if your intent is to stop them when you expose them and such, like we're doing? All right, I've babbled long enough. What do you have to say about this?
Okay, well, first off is I'm going to do a little bit of intent first. We'll get on the skeptics later. And the intent is we go back with clients today to find the cause, the effect of how these beings got in. And the important part is to find the dimension that they entered. Once we find the dimension, then we know what came in, we find it, and we take it out. So you need to find the dimension first. So we go back, 1-year-old. Thank you. What's happening? I've got the wrong parents. I don't want to be here. Thank you. So I don't want to be here. The intent of I don't want to be here is an invitation for something that does. I wish I was dead. That's an invitation for something that wants to live. I wish I had a friend. That's an invitation for the little friend to appear. All in the invisible. That's the first law, is intent. And we have found through the thousands of clients we've worked on, when these things come in, we go back. Now let's just take the 1-year-old. 1-year-old, I got the wrong parents. Well, reality is you haven't got the wrong parents. I send them back in time to show them what they did to come back and have to experience violent parents. If they were violent in the past for their children, they will come back to violent parents. Only then will they learn their own creation. Once they've acknowledged their own creation, then they can let go of that and they can move on. So intent is the first part there of letting other beings in. Now, under the universe's laws, intent is the first thing. What is your intent? Well, it's really interesting because under the laws of law, and our law, L-A-W, and laws, and under the judge's system, in a court case, the judge says, and what was the intent of the plaintiff? What is the intent of the person? Because the intent is very important when it comes to law, L-A-W law. The universe law is that intent is an invitation. Now, for us to make changes to anything, whatever your intent is, that is your intent. That's the individual intent of the being. And a lot of the time, the independent view of the intent of the being is they're in a world of struggle, they're in a world of external world, and their intent is fighting the physical world of reality. Well, my thing is that you can do more when you understand how this universe works on the intent of metaphysics, and you can put that into play and you can make massive changes. Let's go to the skeptics. The intent of a skeptic is nothing exists. Well, if the intent of a skeptic is nothing exists, and these don't exist, and this doesn't exist, and this can't be, then all they're doing is they're running a program. People don't realise the day you're born, you're programmed. Your mother's programming, your father's programming. All the programs that are running you are in the soul, and the soul is running the programs. The programs, all the beliefs and assumptions you've taken on, all the programs you've taken on, they all become part of the program that is running you. Now, most people's intent is the program of the belief and the assumption, or assumption, the beliefs that they've got becomes part of their reality. If you're a skeptic and you believe nothing exists, and you believe, reptilians don't exist and these don't exist, then most of the time they're running the programs. And the programs are what's been locked into the cell of that program. Now, if your intent is nothing exists, then how can anything ever exist in your reality? It can't exist. You know, I learned a long time ago, and one of the research days we were doing in my early days, and I used to get so frustrated with people because I was doing mind magic, and I was doing a lot of party things, and you always had a bunch of skeptics. No, it can't happen. This can't be. This is not happening. You know, it's a trick. It's a trick. And I used to get so frustrated when I was younger in proving this is happening before your eyes. This is reality. And they couldn't accept the reality. And then one day I heard this little voice, which is my spirit, says, this lesson is for you. This is the levels of life. And all of a sudden I realised it's like putting a ladder against the wall of a house. And if I get to the top of the ladder, I see the big picture. If I'm on the first rung, I only see the bottom picture, and I only see the small picture. And life is like a ladder, and we go up one step at a time. Sometimes we try to go 2 steps, and we fall back. Sometimes we try to go up the ladder too fast, we're going to have a mental breakdown or mental breakthrough. One step at a time. So the intent of each individual is where they are in that moment. Now, with the skeptics, I put intent skeptics together because a skeptic's intent is nothing's going to work. And as Spirit showed me in the past, plant the seed and walk away. Because you can't convince anything to anybody because their belief system. But if you plant the seed, through time, that seed will grow. And eventually, they'll broaden their horizons and they'll start to look beyond the fence. They'll start to look beyond. They'll start to do their own research to find out what they hadn't been programmed in or to go against the programming, and they'll start to individually think beyond that program. So you can turn around and you can push, tell. And look, if a person's not there and they haven't grown to the state where they're open enough to listen, then they're just running on programs, that's all. And most of our world today are running on programs. Most people run on programs. Most people believe totally what the government tells them. Most people believe what the media tells them. Most people believe what the pharmaceuticals tell them. People are running on programs because they've been programmed to believe that because the doctor did university training, he knows what he's talking about. Well, hang on. Let's go and have your doctor today. You go to the doctor and what's he do? He goes onto a computer, looks it up on a computer and tells you what's wrong with you because the computer told him so. Well, who told the computer that that's what it is? You know, we're forgetting that the greatest healers are us. We know more about us and our own body than anyone else. And we have the ability to make healing to ourselves, but we're always seeking outside ourselves because we've been programmed. We ask them. They have the answers. They went to university. They must know the Well, what do universities know about law? What do universities know about? I look at today and I say, mental health's in chaos. Why? It's in chaos because they're taking the advice from the wrong people. They're not listening to understand what's really going on because they put that as being metaphysical and they only understand the physical and the visible. So again, we've got belief systems, we've got the skeptics, we've got the intent, and the intent is this is what I've been programmed to believe, so I'm going to go along with what I am programmed to believe, and nothing else is going to change.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the, just want to point out a thing about skeptics. I have no doubt that many of the prominent skeptics in this world that are designed to debunk what people like you and me talk about, people like Michael Shermer and James Randi, they're not stupid. They know that the stuff that they're trying to debunk is very much true, but I can assure you that there's definitely stuff going on behind the scenes that they're going along to get along with something that's making their lives very wealthy and happy and all that. And if they didn't go along to get along and be skeptics, then they wouldn't be leading such luxurious and pleasant lives. I can't prove that, but it seems so counterintuitive that these people are so stupid that they don't realize that what they're being skeptical about is bullcrap. But you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I do, because I'm not going to mention names, but what I'm going to say is that a lot of these men that go into secret societies are rewarded with money, position and prestige. But what they don't realise is they've sold a soul. What does that mean? This is the time of the harvest. When the end of the cycle comes, there are not enough vehicles to go around. These beings want to come through and they want to experience this dimension. So next time around, this is why suicides are going through the roof. If these beings can get you to commit suicide, because this is the end of the cycle, is the harvest, then they get your spirit, and when they harvest the soul, they get your vehicle next time round and you're in the back seat. Now, so these people, what happens is a lot of these people at this very high level they don't even realise that their thoughts aren't their own thoughts. They don't even think for themselves anymore. They just run on the program. And a lot of the program is interdimensional beings that are manipulating their thought processes.
Yes, I can certainly go along with that. Now, moving on to something else on here. You mentioned this earlier in passing, but I'd like to talk about in greater detail what exactly means the whole thing about time loops. Well, first of all, what is time? Well, many would assert it's just an illusion. Past, present, future all happening simultaneously. But then some ask the question, okay, well, I can go along with that, but how do you make sense of the phenomenon of timelines? If everything is happening simultaneously, why are there more than one timeline? And also, another thing that I've heard discussed and hypothesized about is, can you change your past timeline by altering what you are in the present? One example I've heard of this is, let's say you're a bad guy, and you find out in your past life that you were once a member of Genghis Khan's Mongolian army. Well, let's say you decide, okay, I'm not going to be a bad guy anymore. I'm going to be a good guy from now on because, well, maybe you hear about the law of attraction. You decide, okay, I'm going to get my shit straight, going to get my life together. Well, does that mean that if you were to look at your past life, you would see that you're no longer, you aren't a member of Genghis Khan's army anymore? You've actually changed your past life so that you're, well, something else. Now, I've talked about this to some other people, and they tell me, no, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't matter how you try to change your life in the present moment. You will still see the same past life regardless, no matter how you try to change your life and all that. And also, when it comes to time loops and the whole phenomenon of time travel, there are entities that are time travelers. In fact, I once heard Andrew Bartzis say Christopher Columbus, the pre-1492 Christopher Columbus, had a completely different soul than the post-1492 Christopher Columbus. His soul was actually a time-traveling soul. And, well, when you talk about being able to travel through time and whether or not you can create paradoxes or not with the grandfather paradox, it's commonly been said, no, there's no such thing as the grandfather paradox, because you're just going to travel through it to another dimension for all intents and purposes. When you travel into the past, it's a whole new different reality. But I've even heard some others say, well, no, actually, maybe you can, in theory, do the grandfather paradox. The problem is something is going to happen that's going to prevent you from being able to kill your grandfather and create the paradox. Like, you try to shoot your grandfather with a gun and you go back in time, like a bird is going to fly across the scene and block out the bullet and sacrifice itself to prevent you from killing your grandfather or something. So, well, I'm babbling and digressing. I could keep going on, but in regards to understanding time loops and what it actually is, well, what does the word loop mean, and how do we make sense of how time and timelines work? Okay, what's your take on this whole phenomenon?
Okay, if we could picture a spring, it's a shame I can't show photos on this here, but if we could picture a spring, and we take any point on the spring, and we go back 360 degrees, that 360 degrees is we're back at the same time on the parallel. In other words, deja vu. This has all happened before. It's happening now, and it's going to happen again in the future. But the past and the present sets up the future. Now, if we in the present change the past, we're going to create a new outcome for the future. So this is on the big spring, the big time. The deja vu's coming up now, where we're coming into this big cycle. That's the big cycle. In that big cycle, you might have had thousands and thousands of lifetimes in that cycle. This is a big one that's coming around. So in that period of time, we have lifetime after lifetime. So let's take your lifetime. We've found that through lifetime, sometimes in a past life, you might have been a male, sometimes you're a female. It makes no difference. And if you in the past were aggressive and to your children, I'll use that example, then you come back in this lifetime to parents and be aggressive. Now wait, once you understand that and you've learnt that lesson, you can go back and change the past in the present, which will create a new outcome for the future. Now when you create that new outcome for the future, that means you do not have to be attracted to parents that can be violent to you. In other words, let's create new parents. How would you like the new parents to be? And you create the new parents for the future where they can be loving and caring parents, because you're now loving and caring in the past as you move through that new cycle of time. Each time we do this, we better the future cycles of time of the big picture. So that explained the grandpa paradox, what's going on there. And the dimension itself, as I said, you've got to really draw it in picture. Now, when we have time loops, if we were to short circuit a time loop, if you look at time as a wave formation, now let's look like this. As a wave formation, if I was to shortcut from the top of the wave to the next top of the next wave, when I go back with deja vu to the parallel, I'm actually shortcutting through time. And I'm sending the client back through time to deja vu, to the event of the past. We're actually changing. Sorry, we're going back into the past life, we change the past life. But when I do other things and other research we've done, we've sent them back into deja vu in the past. We've sent them back from the past into the future, where they've predicted 10 events for the next week, and every event spot on came through because it all happened before. Nothing's changed. But if we can change the past in the present, we're going to create these new outcomes for the future. So when we go back to your past lifetime of what's been created, and sometimes people are stuck in lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, till we go back and we change what's happened. And the moment we change that, we will create a new outcome for the future cycles of time that we're entering into. Nothing has to be the way it was. And when we start to understand the bigger picture of the bigger dimensions of how time and time loops work, then we understand how to do this and we understand how it works. Look, there's not many people out there. This is something that Aboriginal culture has known this for thousands of years. And yet you go into Aboriginal culture and a lot of the communities, why don't you share some of the knowledge? And the question, by asking why don't you share some of the knowledge, and the answer I get back is why? They don't listen. And that's true, because we have a world that tries to dictate all the time and is not prepared to listen to other cultures. It thinks it knows it all. So it has to live by its experiences for its own sake. You know, I look at a lot of communities today. This is getting off the track a little bit, but again, we're going to talk about time loops in this sense. Now, let's just say back in time, here in Australia, you could go out 100 years ago and you get what's known as Aboriginal hunting licence. And you go out for a quota for the weekend. And you go out and shoot Aborigines like rabbits. But the moment you shoot those Aborigines, those spirits are in your field. And they're going to come through time with you. And they're going to be very aggressive and they want to get back at you. So what happens? The moment you die, the universe steps in. And the universe says, okay, first thing is you need to come back in a black body so you'll learn. So now you come back in a black body. So you're a white spirit in a black body, but hang on, you've got these Aboriginal spirits in your field. The moment you drink alcohol and your defences are down, they're going to pick a fight with someone hoping to get your head bashed in, thank you. But wait, say you're not drinking, and somebody comes into your field that is drinking, they'll jump that body, hoping to get your head bashed in. We look at the violence that's going on in the Inuits in Canada, Aboriginal culture, and the American Indians, what's taking place. You've got a lot of white spirits in black bodies because no one has ever gone back in time and cleared what took place in the past with those spirits and released them. They are still stuck in those dimensions of time. And we need to create what I call the time loops by going through time and changing it. We go in through communities and we're clearing the genocide of the past. And we bring all those spirits through someone on the table. We bring the spirits through. Sometimes there's thousands. We unfold collectively independent upon their own separate dimensions of time. We unfold the trauma of the death and we change it. We get them to change the past and present for the future so it can never take place, and we release those spirits. And that area gets cleared. You know, I had a woman say to me, one of my students, she said, I won't tell you what state this was, but a man fell on the train tracks and the train stopped 1 foot from him. And he said someone pushed him. So we got the cameras and went through all the cameras. Nobody pushed him. But she said, going through the cameras, I realised something after doing your course. She said, we went through and looked, and they're all the same spot. All these actors, 30 people a week try committing suicide on these railways, and they're all the same spot. She said, and after what you talked about, a black spot, this could be a black spot. I said, that's right. Everything's alive, and once it's created, it seeks its own survival, and it'll take people out in the same spot until that spot's cleared so it never exists in the future. Everything in nature is alive. And to clear anything, you've got to short circuit through time to the event back in the past. Then you unfold time and space in the dimension, bring it through into the future. And once you change the future, you change the new outcome of the future. That's how it works.
Thank you.
And I can understand a lot of people that have never experienced, never seen, or never understood what we do. But as I said, we have over 1,000 students right now in 40 countries around the world, and most of those students had one session, realised the changes that took place in their life, and they wanted to learn this for their own country. And that's how it's growing so fast.
Thanks, and I'd like to ask another thing about how things work in regards to another phenomenon that's somewhat related to time. That's the whole karma phenomenon. Different ways people can define karma, but the general consensus is what you give is what you get. You better do good, or karma's going to come back to bite you. Well, the reason I bring this up, I want to understand how the universe can dictate how karma will work. How does the universe determine whether someone will get eye for an eye karma, or karma will be progressively received in little increments over time? Now, one extreme example that I give of this is, let's say in this life you get raped. You get raped and you're wondering, what did I do to deserve this? Well, you look at your, you consult maybe an Akashic Records reader, look at your past lives, and you discover, much to your horror, that in a past life you're the one that committed the rape, and in order to resolve the karma, the Creator decided to make you get raped in this reality. Now that is eye for an eye karma, in which the all the karma is resolved in one sitting. However, there's the other kinds of karma where, well, maybe you don't get raped in one sitting. Maybe you get a small amount of karma bit by bit. But like, let's say one day you get jumped in the street. Next day someone kicks you in the nuts. Third day someone steals from you. The next day you get what I'm trying to say here. Bit by bit things happen to you until eventually the Creator decides, okay, you suffered enough. The karma that you committed in your past life by raping someone has finally been resolved. So how do you determine what kind of, or how does the Creator determine, I should say, and your guardian angels and spirit guides for that matter, determine what kind of karma you're going to get?
Okay, the universe looks a lot this way. It says, karma is really the universal law of compensation, to compensate for your imbalance, to bring you back into balance. It says everything you've ever created has an effect upon all other creations. If you chose through your free will to go and rape another in the past, then you must experience what you did to another, so you'll understand that creation, and therefore we can have balance in that creation, and that will affect all of creation. So the universe doesn't look at anything as a judgment. What it says is, you chose to create it, therefore you must experience it, because what you actually did was you invade the space of another, and any time you invade the space of another, anytime you go in another's game, then there's compensation. In other words, if I enter the game of another, I'm subject to laws of the game, and because I've forced myself onto another, therefore I must experience another force themselves upon me. How will I understand that game? Now, if you talk about multiple things going on, then I would say, then what are the multiple things that are taking place in separate dimensions with that being back in time? Because each one of those is different until the being goes back and looks at it and makes the changes to it. If they don't make the changes, and once they have experienced it and they acknowledge it, look, I had a woman come to me, she pulls the top down, has a look down here, and she's been stabbed 14 times. Boy, I said, what did you do to deserve that? I was a victim. I didn't do anything. I said, would you really like to find out what you've done? Oh, all right, get on the table. She goes back to a past life. She's a 20-year-old male. I just stabbed the dirty, filthy prostitute to death, the dirty bitch. Thank you. Why did you stab her? The church told me to. Thank you. So following out the lead of the church back in those days, I said, Spirit, step out of body. Spirit, go and acknowledge the person that you stabbed in the past. Have their spirit there now. Spirit sees it. Yes, got it. Come back in present day. Spirit, step out of body. I want you to go in present day with the person who attacked you. Oh my God, it's the same. Thank you. Have you learnt your lesson yet? Because if you haven't learnt the lesson, you'll continue being stuck in that moment of time. Now, we do get people that were the perpetrators, and they become the victim next lifetime, and they don't like it. They get stuck in the victim mode, and they get stuck in that victim mode lifetime after lifetime after lifetime until they eventually go back and see what they did to create it. And then once they've acknowledged it, Spirit says, okay, now we can loop time upon that dimension, we can clear it. Thank you, you've acknowledged it. If you want to go to war and you want to mutilate and kill, the universe says that's fine, but you must experience what it's like to be mutilated and killed. You created that reality. Everything's about balance. In the universe, it doesn't turn around and say, I'm going to punish you for what you did. No, it says, you created your reality, therefore you have to experience your reality. How else will you understand it?
Thank you for clearing up how the universe works in that regard. Now, two different things here that have the same word here on this list of things: maths and geometry and Plutonic geometry. Well, okay, isn't geometry math? So I'm interested to see why you separated the word maths from geometry. And when it comes to Plutonic, well, that's the different shapes and such that, like sacred
That's correct.
geometry and all that. So, I mean, sacred geometry, when you're talking about using sacred geometry for all sorts of good purposes, I mean, you got the flower of life, and lots of other things. I mean, all those things can in some way be twisted in bad ways. Like everything that they say is bad, like a swastika or something. That's not a bad thing. It was just twisted into a bad thing by, well, evil forces. Same thing is true with sacred geometry. The sacred geometry field around the Earth is, according to Andrew Bartus, like the ultimate thing that suppresses our consciousness even more so than the evil deeds of the Vatican. But okay, I'm digressing a little bit here. Maybe talk about a little too much unpleasant stuff. Let's maybe try to keep this a little more positive. I'm interested to know, like I said, why are you separating the word maths from geometry when geometry is a form of math? And what kind of shapes and solids and such in Plutonic geometry do you think are the best ones for us to experiment with and use for love-based and good purposes?
Well, again, individual choice when you talk about love-based good purposes. What I'm saying takes place here is that the universe is based on maths and geometry. Now, the first off is the one is a singular. Two is duality. But when duality comes together, it creates a triangle, which is a three. And that happens to be, the first one's the law of intent, the second one's duality. And it's really interesting because I do not like religion, but I'll give it its credence. And that is, there are universal laws right throughout it. And so if any two agree, so be it. Because if two agree, it creates a triangle, which is the law of agreement. Now, from the law of agreement, we go from the 3 into the 4, which is the square. Well, to understand the square, if I make an agreement, so just say you and your spirit make an agreement, and my spirit and myself make an agreement, and we integrate the agreement together, we're going to have two triangles. Out of the two triangles, we're going to create a pyramid. The base of the pyramid is going to be a square. But we take the top of the pyramid, and we go through the Fibonacci mathematics from the top to the bottom, exactly 3 cycles of time, the past, the present, and the future. And it finishes at exactly 144. Sorry, the 144, we go to 1-4. The 1 to the square. The base of the pyramid is a square. But once it drops into the square, it squares itself, 1 to the square to the cube. It now drops into the cube. And from the cube now starts Platonic geometry. It goes from the cube into the tectone, isodoctrine, octahedron, where the first form of crystallization of any form starts with the cube and into the tectahedron. Consciousness is linked to the tectahedron. So let's take the pyramidal structure. Everything from the cause, action, reaction, effect, in other words, from the past, the present, and the future of the 3 cycles of time is all in the invisible world. Then it drops into the visible world, the square, first form of matter, starts with the cube. And once it drops into the cube, it now sets itself into the cells of the physical world of reality. If we continue with the numbers, the 5 represents the pentagram. Well, it's funny how kids draw a square, which is invisible, and they put a roof on it. So square is the first form of matter, and then the square represents, you've just called something in, is the law of agreement, which is 5-sided. So just say you've made an agreement with other dimensions. There's your pentagram. The 6, the next number on the 6, which represents entrapment. The 7 represents the change. So whatever you've entrapped in yourself by calling it in, changes you. It sets itself up. The 8 now repeats over and over throughout your life. Now you're stuck in time. It's repeating itself over and over throughout you. 9 releases that, which then creates 360 degrees completion of that dimension, and you're ready to clear another dimension of reality. So it's really interesting. So let's go into religion. And religion says, and the mark of the beast is 666. Well, what's it telling me? It's telling me that's entrapment in the past, the present, and the future in the 3 dimensions of time. So within this big conjunction of the deja vu, the present, and the future, you're trapped in their dimension until the conjunction takes place. It says the keys for souls being saved. Well, first off, it says, and the Nephilim uprise after 144,000 years. What's it telling me? After 1 to the square to the cube of this physical world of reality, and after the past, the present, and the future, 3 dimensions of time, a conjunction takes place. And the giants, being the Nephilim, went back to where they came. And the key to souls being saved is 144,000. 1 to the square to the cube. In other words, at the end of the conjunction, the past, present, future, which we're coming up to now, is the key to the souls being saved. It's also the harvest at the end of the conjunction. So right throughout is maths and geometry of the universe that's based in there. And the universe is based on maths and geometry. And when you apply the maths, it actually works. And that's what we're applying. That's why I'm teaching my students how to apply the maths to get this work. Because it's an invisible thing that actually works when you apply it. And that's why we talk about maths and geometry. And the maths and the Platonic geometry, the Platonic geometry starts with a square into the cube, into the tectahedron, isohedron, doctahedron, octahedron, which is the first form of crystallization, and consciousness is linked to the tectahedron. The crystals in your bone are crystals. The crystals in your skin, they're crystals. Everything that crystallizes the physical world of reality is alive, but it's linked to Platonic geometry. So if we go into the Fibonacci mathematics, again, in the beginning, we find the cause, the action, the reaction, the effect is what's locked in through the invisible into visible. And now we go in and we have a look at the hologram, because man's a hologram, and we look at a fractal. A fractal is exactly that. It's a dimension of its own that's linked to a dimension of its own, that's linked to a dimension of its own, linked to a dimension of its own. And the pyramidal structure of the fractal moving through time is repeating itself through the cycles of similarity. When we go and we change a person, we get them to change that event, that dimension, it changes the fractal. I say to my clients, take it easy for the next 2 days, because the next 48 hours, your body's going through what I call a defragging of the fractals of the hologram, and you are the hologram, and it's making changes, which it does. I hope that explains if you understand it.
Oh yes, and to be honest with you, I'm probably going to have to re-listen to this whole entire interview. Believe me, I was listening carefully, but you've gone into such great detail. It kind of inspires me to want to listen to this whole thing over again, and I encourage many of my listeners, I'm sure, to want to listen to this again, because I do commend you. You're going into very great detail, more so than many of the other people I've had on this show, and I commend you for that. And, well, we've only got, I know you have things to do after this program, so we'll end it at 8 Eastern, which is about 7.5 minutes from now. But one question I do want to ask you, not really anything here on the list, although it could be in a sense, dealing with time and all. The whole question of, well, how does reality work from a standpoint of observing and non-observing and all that? Well, we've all heard of the double slit experiment from Australia, but what many people probably, more so people probably haven't heard of, is the whole Schrodinger's cat phenomenon. And when I had Andrew Bashago as a guest on my show, he's the guy that's well known for having participated, well, he alleged to have participated, I think he's telling the truth, with time travel programs with DARPA and the U.S. government and all that. And he said he rejects the idea of Schrodinger's cat, which basically says that the cat is put in a box with some sort of a vial of poison that's set to go off at a certain time, and that time is past, and you as an outside observer who knows, okay, this is, at this point the vial should have exploded and killed the cat. How do I know the cat is dead? Well, you don't. You have to look at it, and the true answer is the cat dead or alive is the sum of the cat being dead and the cat being alive, as those that agree with Schrodinger's cat would assert. However, Bashago said, I reject that idea. I think that, well, to put it the way Einstein asked, how do we know if the moon is there if nobody's looking at it? Well, it doesn't matter, Bashago asserts, whether anyone is observing the moon or looking at the moon or not. The moon will be there regardless of whether it's being looked at. The universe exists as it does in a certain way, and you, when you enter a certain timeline, you can't manipulate or change the timeline. That's not what's happening. Shouldn't be thought of as you're changing or manipulating the timeline. Instead, you're just participating as a participant in the events of that timeline, and how the reality exists is independent of whether or not you are observing it and everyone is observing you and people are looking at other people or not. It doesn't work like that. From that standpoint, he rejects Schrodinger's cat. So do you agree or disagree with the idea, Bashago's claim that you can reject Schrodinger's cat? That's not how reality actually works.
Well, listen to you. It's a little bit confusing what you're saying, But reality is independent individual for each and every one of us. You know, what we see in our own reality is independent individual reality. Look, you know, I get clients that see in other dimensions and can see other beings and see other things. Well, obviously there's been a glitch in the programming there for them to be able to see in those dimensions. I don't dispute it, but if these dimensions have an effect on them, then we will go in and we will find out, you know, where does that come from to have an effect, and we'll make changes to that dimension. What is reality? Whatever we perceive it to be is reality. Why do you think at a car accident, there's a car accident, the police come along and they separate everybody and they get a statement from everybody? No two statements are the same. Everybody perceives it from a different reality. What is reality? So you got to look at this. Now let's look at the military. You know, I've spoken to some people in the military that are doing some of these research and some of the experiments, and I know what DARPA's doing, but I'll tell you something else. They don't fully understand the dimensions, and they don't fully understand how to access and unfold time. They understand the soul and the dimensions. They understand how to access the past, you know, and they go out, and I know they've sent out, you know, a whole batch of soldiers to try and make changes to the future because they've accessed the past, present, and in the future, and they see what's going to happen. So they send out soldiers to try and make changes to the future, and then they sit around and say, well, why didn't it happen? Well, when this particular person came to me and was approached me over this, I had a bit of a laugh to myself, and I said, you really don't understand it. What you're doing is you're just accessing the soul. No, you're just accessing the past dimension of reality. What's already happened. You're just looking at the future, what's already happened. Nothing's going to change because it's already happened. You don't know how to change time. And you're looking and trying to change physical reality from happening. No, it's already been destined to take place. And until you unfold time and space and change the outcome of the future, only then will ever change. And because they've never taken the time to understand the internal world, it's all about external world. It's all about manipulation and control. It's all about the soul. It's all about the programming. They have no idea of the internal world. And therefore, they're never going to get the results from the internal world. Why? Because the universe will not give them the keys. The universe has its own laws. If you're coming from the wrong space, I'll tell you now, you'll never understand the keys. But if you come from the right space, you work with the universe, and your ethics are right with the universe, and you're working with it, then it will unfold the keys to you, and you'll understand a lot more. So, the bit about the cat, I don't know. I have to, you know, I'm not really down to understanding that meaning of it, but I do know one thing. Nothing has to be the way it was. If you just take an example, and we see this all the time, whenever I teach a class, I take a photo first day and I take a photo last day, 7 days later. And we see physical reality taking place within humans. What are you? What are you? You are whatever's within you. Whatever's within you is going to show through you. And sometimes we look at people and we can see the other forces that are in there. But when we go back in time, we take them out, we see physical changes take place. So if we can change physical reality and we change it today, we've just changed tomorrow. We've just changed the outcome of the future by changing it in this moment. Nothing has to be the way it was. You just have to understand the keys to understand how to make the change.
Okay, fair enough explanation. And okay, we got 2 minutes left. Time for one more subject. Octaves. Hey, you put it here. Why an octave? Why the significance of the number? Well, the significance there is obviously the number 8, but another significance is Pythagoras would say the octave has a ratio of 2 to 1. So it's not just 8; it's also the 2 to 1 ratio. So just for the hell of it, let's conclude on this. Why the octave? What's so significant about it that it deserves a page on your Holographic Kinetics website?
Well, the octaves is a sign. In other words, watch this. If we take the minerals, and first is the gases, then the liquid, then the rock, then the plankton. So I'll just take the minerals. And what happens is that as minerals through an octave, one mineral can change to another mineral through the cycles of time, and then evolves into another mineral through the cycles of time, evolves another mineral. We find that spirit, as spirit moves into different gases, rock, liquid, everything is evolving through time and through change. Even humans. We take the human. Look at the low level of the octaves of the low scale. But as we move through the, like we call the octaves, 8 cycles. And the 8th cycle is the cycle man becomes stuck in. He becomes stuck in that. Until we release it, releasing it as the 9, which completes that dimension and is ready to another dimension of reality. But everything goes through or I believe it's the 8 octaves. It goes through the scales of the 1 to the 2 to the 3, of the multiples, of the cycles. Then it gets stuck in that pattern, and it's stuck in those patterns of time. Now, every dimension you've ever had and every thought you've ever had, man is stuck in time in that octave of the 8. But it started from a 1, it started from a thought, and it's moved up through it. It's only when we take the 9, which is releasing the energy of that, what he's stuck into, that creates 360 degrees with completion of that dimension, and is ready to clear another dimension of reality. So everything moves through octaves. I don't care whether it's gases, the liquid, the rock, the plankton, plant life, insect life, animal life, or human life. Everything is moving through the octaves, which is a scale system of evolvement.
Huh. Well said. Well said. Very interesting, and well, this whole interview, to say the least, was interesting. And let's let bygones be bygones. I think we can forget all about that little thing of skepticism we had at the beginning when I first let you on the air. You sure made up for it and talk about a lot of interesting things. I'm certainly going to be willing, like I said, to listen to this again, and I encourage other people too, because you've gone into great detail. I'm very impressed. You know what you're talking about, and well, even though I had the hypotheses of holographic kinetics, as I called you on my show, I'm sure there's other people that I got business cards from that I got introduced to the website holographickinetics.com. Might as well get them on my show too to talk about some other things that, well, maybe we didn't touch on this interview. I had to go down the list because there were a lot of subjects, and don't want to keep you from getting to your other obligations, but I didn't really give you a chance now to, well, give out anything you'd like in regards to your, well, I already gave your contact info, your site, Holographic Kinetics, but a contact
Yeah,
info
that'll be
that's on
enough.
there. So you want to say anything else to conclude?
No, that's right. I mean, if you have down the track any other questions, any other time, that's fine. I don't mind coming on and answering those questions. You know, I've spent over 50 odd years of research. You know, I'm 71 years old, and I'm still doing 100 hours a week. I don't have time to slow down or relax, and my research is still going to whole new fields, and I'm constantly being shown new areas that have never been looked at before, and we're looking at these new areas and we're researching these new areas constantly. You know, the universe is so full of knowledge. It takes lifetimes, I think, to really understand all that knowledge that's out there.
No question. Time's an illusion, but it yet takes time to learn these things, as a paradox I just made up there goes. So, pleasure having you on, Steve. And well, maybe what you have said at the beginning did inspire me to get a camera. Maybe I actually should do a show where people can see things every so often, just for the sake of variety. I mean, I said I have a great radio voice. That's why I like to keep it audio, but it's what comes out of the mouth that's important, not what the radio host's voice sounds like. So, well, anyway, I'm babbling and digressing, and I don't want to keep you from other obligations. Good luck. You've been up since 4 in the morning in your time zone. Sleep well when you're done everything you're doing, and good luck on your future endeavors. Take care. It was a pleasure.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate that.